Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the launch of the 2013 edition of the World Energy Outlook. It's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers today. Maria van der Hoeven is the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. Fatih Birol is the Chief Economist of the International Energy Agency and editor of the World Energy Outlook. Maria will now deliver some opening remarks and discuss a few key findings. Fatih will go into more detail, and then we'll turn to your questions. Maria, over to you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. I'm very pleased to be here with you today and to share the findings of our 2013 edition of World Energy Outlook. When I was in the antichambre, one of you told me, well, this is heavy. I said, yes, it's heavy. But the most important thing is the messages in it are heavy as well. So please take care of them and use them. Now, this World Energy Outlook provides our annual assessment of the latest developments in global energy markets and analysis the potential paths that energy and climate trends could take in the coming decades. Potential paths. And it's up to policymakers to decide which path to choose. Now, our main objective is to give these policymakers the insights needed to make judgments about our energy future and so inform sound decision-making. I'm mindful that many of those policymakers will be gathered in Warsaw in a few days' time to make important assessments of climate policies and decisions about advancing them. And the findings we will discuss here today are therefore particularly timely. As the IEA has said many times, greenhouse gas emissions, 2/3 of which come from the energy sector, are still on a dangerous course. And if we stay on the current path, we will not come close to this internationally agreed goal of limiting the rise in global temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius. But you know, that's not the only persistent problem in the energy sector that requires long-time solutions. Access to modern energy, for instance, a basic form of energy security, continues to elude almost 1/5 of the world's population. And for billions more, any true sense of energy security is undermined by high energy prices. It's now more than 5 years after the onset of the global financial crisis, and yet the recovery remains fragile. For many consumers and businesses, energy prices remain stubbornly high, and alarmingly, oil prices have averaged over $110 a barrel since 2011. And such a sustained period of high oil prices is without parallel. So what is this about? This actually is the classic energy trilemma that we face. It is about security, it's about sustainability, it's about economic prosperity. And with that in mind, let me turn to this year's World Energy Outlook. And there are, of course, many findings and analysis in a book of this size, but let me mention 3 that address and link each part of that trilemma I just mentioned. And the first has to do with oil, and that's the focus fuel of this year's World Energy Outlook. Last year, we wrote that North American developments were helping to redraw the global energy map. And indeed, many of the changes we highlighted have only become more rapid, more pronounced since then. Technology and high prices are unlocking new supplies of oil, but of course also of gas, that were previously thought to be out of reach. And yet, while unconventional production may herald the dawning of a golden age of gas, it does not necessarily create an era of oil abundance. New supplies of unconventional oil will help reduce OPEC's share of supply over the next decade. Other new sources will also contribute, such as oil from Brazil. Brazil is our focus country this year. But let's not forget, the Middle East is still the only large source of low-cost oil. And we expect it to take back its role as the dominant source of oil supply growth from the mid-2020s. And still, all new sources of oil will be crucial to meeting increasing global demand to 2035. Oil demand growth will be like energy demand growth generally, and that means geographically uneven, barely changing in the OECD, and shifting further to Asia and the Middle East. At the nexus of supply and demand, of course, are energy prices, and they will remain a live issue in political debate, especially in terms of affecting competitiveness. And this year's World Energy Outlook addresses this issue head-on, and the second area I want to cover. I mentioned the high oil prices we have seen since 2011 and their impact on economic well-being. But there has also been a substantial widening of the gap between natural gas prices in the United States, Europe and Asia. Electricity price differentials are also large between regions, and this is key in our globalized world where energy costs can be vital to the competitiveness of energy-intensive industries. So, what's the picture going forward? In the central scenario of the World Energy Outlook, the difference in regional natural gas and electricity prices narrows somewhat, but remains pronounced. And these price disparities impact industrial competitiveness. United States, which experiences relatively low energy prices, sees a slight increase in its share of global export of energy-intensive goods, providing the clearest indication of a link between relatively low energy prices and the industrial outlook. But conversely, the shares of the European Union and Japan both decline relative to current levels. So key to adapting to higher energy prices over the longer term will be efficiency, what we have called the hidden viewer, and more recently the first viewer. And that brings me to my third point. World Energy Outlook 2013 highlights the importance of taking advantage of potential efficiency gains in order to maintain competitiveness. Energy efficiency will be essential to getting that balance right, and I'm pleased to say that it has become a focal point of energy politics and policies. And as we have emphasized in the World Energy Outlook series this year, there are pragmatic strategies that governments and industry can pursue to reduce energy use and emissions that are either GDP neutral or positive for economic growth. But still, 2/3 of the economic potential for energy efficiency is set to remain untapped in 2035, unless market barriers like fossil subsidies can be overcome. There are also regulatory barriers, there are split incentives, but they have to be overcome. So while unconventional production can provide energy security by meeting growing demand, it can also affect relative competitiveness and market development. Efficient and interconnected markets, they will be key to addressing price differentials, and energy efficiency will be crucial to maintaining competitiveness as well as the principal role in achieving a sustainable energy system. So, dear friends, major changes are emerging in the energy world in response to shifts in economic growth, efforts at decarbonization, and technological breakthroughs. And for decision makers trying to reconcile economic, energy security, and environmental objectives, it's essential to be aware of the dynamics at the heart of today's energy markets. We have the tools to deal with such profound market change, and those who anticipate global energy developments successfully can derive an advantage, while those that do not risk taking poor policy and investment decisions. So, I think that this edition of World Energy Outlook will provide useful insights that can help policymakers, but also industry, other stakeholders, to find their way in a fast-changing energy world.